and today we are going to be discussing payroll. Welcome back, everyone. This is a continuation episode of Tax Talk. If you have not seen the main episode, I will put the links in the description. I am still Patrick Best from Best Tax Solutions, the tax attorney extraordinaire. With me, again, is Joanne Leisure of Day One Accounting. And today we are going to be discussing payroll. So, Joanne, can you tell me a little bit about what you do to assist businesses in implementing payroll?
Yeah. Well, what I do is if someone tells me that they want to have employees, I, just obviously get them started in payroll. It's not as difficult as what people might think. There's just some items that are needed in order to get started. One item might be, we need to get your workers' comp insurance. Easy enough. All we have to do is call up your business insurer, your commercial insurer, and say, hey, we need workers' comp. And they ask you a few questions. Next thing you know, they give you a quote. We add it into the payroll. And a lot of times I will use either QuickBooks or I've just started using Gusto payroll for my clients. So it's not difficult at all.
Well, that's good, because one of the things that I see all the time when I'm working with small businesses to reduce their tax burden, we're doing tax planning for a business. Sometimes I make the suggestion that we move from a sole proprietorship or Schedule C LLC to an S Corp. Mm-hmm. But an S Corp requires the owner to take a paycheck or a salary.
Right.
So sometimes people don't want to do that because they're concerned about taking on that additional burden, both financially and administratively, mm-hmm. even if the cost savings to them can be tremendous.
Yeah.
But it is not as difficult as they think, as I understand it from you. Okay.
It is not. And if you're just starting out, and Patrick has recommended that you do the S Corp, remember that your paycheck doesn't need to be a huge amount of money. It's just a strategy to be able to not worry about paying estimated taxes and forgetting to pay the estimated taxes. It's kind of like, let's get paid once a month or whatever it is that you guys decided. And with that said, you just take those payroll taxes out and submit them. And the kind of service that I do, you don't have to worry about all of that. Once you tell me when you want your check to come out, I'm going to handle all of that. I'm going to make sure that you get a check or a direct deposit or whatever the case is, and make sure all of your payroll taxes are submitted.
So is it as simple as just entering either time records or something into an app or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I also use TSheets. So let me just give you an idea of how I start out. I give all my clients a packet, so to speak, to hand off to their employees. And the packet will include pretty much all of the human resources information that's needed. As a person who's going to have employees, you need to do an I-9. You need to, and this is really for yourself too, you need to have an emergency contact information. You need to have, obviously, their social security number. If they want to do bank direct deposit, we need to have their bank account number. It needs to be verified, and so on and so forth. So I put together a packet that includes all of that information, birth dates, hire dates, all that. And, then I set each person up with a time tracking app. Right now I'm using TSheets, where they can actually get an app sent to their phone and can do GPS tracking as well. So you always know that the person's on site. When they arrive or whatever the case is. Sometimes people like to punch in from home. We catch those guys too. But I can link or sync your TSheets over to your payroll software so that it tells it tells how many hours that person worked for the time period that they are being paid for. The other component of that is that if you are a project-based type business, like a general contractor or an event planner, we can have your project synced so that every time someone changes a project, they they clocked in for the Jones project, and by mid-afternoon they were working on the Smith project. They can switch in that app. It's really convenient for them. So,
Which takes us back to forecasting.
Mhm.
So if you haven't watched our forecasting video, I will put the link here, but you should check that out. Particularly, I think it's important for those project-based businesses. But this really takes a lot of the burden away from the business owner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always recommend with business owners, you're not a payroll person. So you don't know all of the rules. You don't know when everything needs to be done. And it's at the time, it may not be important to you. So I always recommend that you are using a professional service when it comes to payroll. Whether it's someone like me who outsources their, or is an outsourced accounting department for you, or it's, something. Is every once in a while, I get people who want to do payroll on their own. And it is an absolute nightmare
Yeah.
when they figure out that they've done it improperly. And that is it's not only a headache, it is very costly, and it can have you suffering years down the line when all of a sudden, 2, 3, 4 years later, you're getting audited for payroll taxes. And it's like, well, I don't understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I can tell you, on my tax resolution side, so working with people who already owe money, a large portion of what I do is related to payroll tax.
Mm.
So like income tax, there's people who don't pay income tax, but payroll tax is really the problem. And here's an important point about hiring a professional. First, aside from just making sure that everything is done properly, you need to file those payroll tax returns. So if you don't know what you're doing, you are going to screw those up.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've done, after the fact. I remember one client I had, who he asked me to do his W-2s. And there are a couple things that you can look at on a W-2 and know, like, right away, like, oh my God, this was totally wrong. Especially the ones where if you have a local tax that's $1 and you paid somebody every week, you know that it should be $52 at the end on that
Right.
W-2. And I've seen it where it's like $10, and I'll ask, did this person only work 10 weeks? It's like, no, they've been here since 2014. And you realize that, okay, I'm doing these W-2s, but these are incorrect.
Well, and if you file incorrect W-2s, you are on the hook as well. The IRS is going to penalize you if those numbers are not correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it becomes a harder project. It's not just me doing your W-2s for you. Now I need to look at your payroll.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always tell people who do decide that they want to do their payroll on their own, that it's probably about Thanksgiving time that you need to take a look at everything you've done throughout the year and start calculating it to make sure that you've actually taken the proper amounts, because you don't have much more time to fix it before, the end of the year. And that's why I don't recommend, you don't want to be sitting there with a calculator trying to figure out whether or not you paid everybody properly.
Don't do it on your own. Don't do it.
Don't do it on your own. And it's not expensive.
But this is one of those, this is one of those areas where it's deceiving, because you think you're saving money and you're actually costing money. Right. Because the cost of payroll is so minimal.
It is.
Compared to the hassle of doing it, the headache of getting it wrong, and the cost to fix it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we say minimal, we're talking about a small fee, for every payroll you do. Sometimes it's based on how many employees you have. It's very minimal. When I say base, I've seen payroll companies that might only have to pay a couple dollars for every employee that you have. There's no reason to risk what you're going to risk by doing it on your own.
Well, it's not worth it. Especially because, and people don't realize this, but payroll taxes, if you do not pay them, if the business does not pay them, you can be assessed that tax personally. Whether you're a corporation, an LLC, none of that matters. If you screw up payroll taxes, the IRS can assess that against you personally.
Right.
And here's where it gets scarier. you don't have to be an owner of the business for that to be assessed against you personally.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have your receptionist entering payroll, your receptionist can be assessed that tax personally, even though that person has no stock in the business, doesn't own it, and that yet the IRS can come after that person individually.
Absolutely.
Or we
Absolutely.
see like
Good.
spouses too. That's another, like I see spouses all the time. My spouse does payroll, and now the IRS is coming after my spouse.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you are an employee of a person who is doing it, you want to make sure that they're doing it properly. Because of what Patrick just said, that you need to raise that as a problem to you. That look, we're not doing this properly. I've seen businesses that float the payroll taxes, and it's like, listen, this isn't your money. You told someone you were going to pay them $15 an hour, and part of that $15 an hour is going to is going in for payroll taxes. It's not no longer your money. So
Yeah.
it's a big problem, and I've heard of businesses shutting down because of it. That is such a big issue. So
Yeah.
don't play with it.
Well, and it gets very dangerous very quickly. I mean, a lot of the businesses that I work with, when they come to me with payroll taxes, I have some people with very manageable payroll tax debt, but I have companies that owe hundreds of thousands of dollars because
Mhm.
it got out of control, and they were floating it, as you said. They missed one,
Mhm.
so then they would borrow from the next payroll to pay the taxes on the first one, and then they would get two behind, and then they would get three behind, and before you know it, you owe multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not only are they coming after your business, but they're coming after you, which is normally when the business owners call me, is that IRS is trying to take something of theirs personally.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, and
It's a,
before you
it's a,
realize, I made that mistake.
yeah, it could be a tragedy, and it's just not worth it. And I think that, when they do float it, once they get away with it once, they realize that, okay, it's not that big of a deal because the IRS
Mm-hmm.
isn't coming after me tomorrow. But those taxes are due at a certain point. They're due at a certain time. And the way I make sure that my clients are doing their payroll is that I show them the cost of the entire payroll. Okay, that is my final report. And what we do is we take that money and we earmark it strictly for that payroll, whether we transfer it to another type of bank account to make sure that it's segregated, or that you got this amount of money coming out and it's coming out on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making it so that you realize that there's a time for it, and it's within a couple of days. End of story. There's no float. There's no, this is the cost. This is how much needs to come through. So
Yeah, and we've been talking about the IRS, and of course that IRS is a big problem, but there are other types of payroll-related expenses that people tend to screw up as well. But like unemployment is one. I've had like
mhm.
uh, Pennsylvania's unemployment office, for example, has come after some of my clients because they weren't paying the unemployment tax.
Mm-hmm, hmm. Yeah,
So that stuff comes up too.
yeah, that's one thing I did forget to mention when I talked about workers' comp. So part of we're in Pennsylvania. So what we have to do is we have to file what's called a PA 100. Some people have filed it in the beginning of their business. I mean, most people, if you're a business owner, you've done that. But maybe they didn't have employees at the time. So we have to actually do something in order to get Pennsylvania to know that you now will be, you will be paying for
Mm-hmm.
your taxes, including your unemployment, and they will send you a number. And so there is a procedure for that. It doesn't take long. It's something that can be done via the web. But again, having a payroll professional, they won't miss that. They won't miss that has to happen, and they won't miss that it's part of the process.
Right. And again, if you take away anything from this video, for the cost, this is a no-brainer. Don't do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is an easier process than you think. It is a cheaper process than you think. It has huge ramifications if you get it wrong.
Absolutely. And one thing I also wanted to touch on that you and I touched on a little bit in an earlier video, and that is the subcontractors, the independent contractors. And there is a difference between independent contractors and employees. And I found a lot of people want to hire people and call them independent contractors when they really truly are employees, because again, it's the cost. They believe that they don't want to spend the money in paying the employer portion of the taxes. They don't want the hassle of having to submit the taxes, but there are a few times when they come into play, and that you could be in a lot of trouble for not categorizing your staff properly. So
Yeah,
if
it's
you
also the
have,
workers' comp, by the way. It's like
yeah,
tax is a portion, but we also see I don't want to pay workers' compensation insurance, and they see that somehow this is some way around that.
yeah. And by the way, it isn't, because part of workers' comp, there's a
Right.
question in there whether or not you have independent contractors or
Well,
subcontractors.
well,
So
right.
you're not
And we
getting
see
around
all the
anything.
time. I'm not an injury attorney, but I have an injury attorney in my office
Mhm.
who handles workers' compensation cases, and people come and they call and they say, "Well, I'm a 1099. I can't get workers' comp." That's not what the rule is. So I
Mhm.
have to explain to you. So we talked again. You were right. We talked in an earlier video about this, and you said that you'll walk through with them what makes somebody an employee versus an independent contractor.
Mhm.
But the real risk here, one, the IRS can decide that you were wrong,
Right.
and that's a problem if the IRS figures that out. But the workers' compensation department can figure out you were wrong too.
Right, absolutely. And unemployment, by the way. This comes up
Yes.
when people get,
Yes.
when people get let go as an independent contractor, so to speak, and then they
Hmm.
go out and they get unemployment. And they are able to tell, someone, hey, I wasn't an independent contractor, I was an
Yes.
employee, and these are the reasons why. I answered the phones, I did this, I did that.
Yep. And the
And
1099 doesn't stop that.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And now you've come up to another problem. Also, during those audits that we talked about, payroll audits, don't forget that when a person comes to you, or the auditor comes to you, what they're also looking for is a list of your subcontractors, and they're
Yes.
looking at also the your checkbooks. They want to see how you've paid that person, and at that point, they may determine that that person was not a subcontractor; they were employees. So keep that in mind, that just because you're getting away with it today doesn't
Yeah.
mean you will get away with it tomorrow.
Well, and with workers' compensation, that's something where people don't realize all it takes is one accident.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
and again, I've heard every excuse in the book. Well, they're not going to get hurt. I have an office, right? We don't do anything dangerous. They're not lifting. They work in an office. Okay, until somebody trips and falls in the parking lot or slips on ice,
Absolutely.
or or,
Absolutely.
or cuts their finger with scissors and has to go to the hospital or something. Like, how about lunchroom accidents? Just you slice
Absolutely. A-
yourself with a knife or something. That you end up at the hospital. They ask you, "How did you get hurt?"
mhm.
The person's going to say, "I got hurt by falling on ice in the parking lot at my job." The hospital is going to report it as a comp injury,
Mhm.
and then you are in trouble, and not just financially, by the way. In
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, it's actually criminal to not have workers' compensation insurance for your employees. And
Mm.
calling them independent contractors and paying them 1099s doesn't fix that problem. They're going to do their own independent analysis. And if you didn't give comp insurance for these people, you can be arrested.
Mm. That I didn't know.
Yeah, well,
That I didn't know. Did you know, though, that if your independent contractor or your employee has left your office, let's say you wanted them to go and deliver something, of course that is a great time for them to get an injury, on the way to your other location,
mhm.
in the middle of the day. So it seems like it's so easy. They are an office. She's just the receptionist. Well, guess what? Just the receptionist does get hurt too. So,
Yeah, and don't succumb to the pressure of your employees. Because the other excuse I get all the time is, well, they don't want to be employees because they don't
mm,
want to pay the FICA taxes.
mm, mm,
Well, a couple problems. I mean, first off, I don't care if you don't want to be an employee. You are,
mhm,
but you have to pay the FICA tax anyway. It
mhm.
just means that they're not filing their tax returns.
Right.
So,
Right.
like,
They're doing
getting a
something wrong on their
1099,
end.
yeah, just to be clear, I mean, you get a 1099, you're still paying that self-employment tax. when you file your tax return. So if you tell me you're not paying it because you're an independent contractor, all that tells me is you're not filing your returns. So you didn't
Right.
actually, you didn't fix the problem here.
Exactly.
So don't listen if your employees are telling you, oh, well, I don't want to pay that tax. So please don't pay me with the W-2, pay me with the 1099. Do not succumb to that pressure either. That's not a good reason not to do that.
Absolutely. And I always think on the side of, I'll call it, the underdog. And in the case of employees who don't know that they are getting a 1099, or maybe they know they're getting a 1099, they don't realize that they should have been paying taxes all along. I hurt for those people when it comes to paying, the tax at the end of the year, them thinking they're going to get a refund like they did last year. And no, you're coming up with a few $1,000s this time because of the fact that someone categorized you as a 1099, even though you're not. So, for those employees, they need to be careful too and looked after as well.
Absolutely. But if you are a legitimate independent contractor, you should call me anyway, because then we could try to reduce your taxes. Legitimate 1099. Not disguised employees. That doesn't
Right.
help much.
I like that name.
Well, that's what they call them. And when you're being arrested for not having the workers' compensation insurance, we call it disguised employees.
Wow.
So thanks, Joanne, again for joining us here. I'm going to put the link for all of the other videos we've done in the description below. I'm also going to put your information below. If anyone's interested in contacting Joanne, just take a look at the description there. As always, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.